had to be at a top management position for more than 3 years. So I had those qualifications. You had to be financially sound, you had to be a United States citizen, and you had to have civic and community, or civic and charitable involvement in the community. We had to go back 20 years, if we had 20 years of involvement in the community, and list all the things that we had done at a management level. And after 5.5 years, there were 9 applicants. I was the only individual applicant and the only woman, and the FCC selected me. And what I received was a construction permit to put a new radio station on the Isle. That was 93.9 FM. And I took it from static on the dial to an active, just wonderful radio station. I was able to hire 10 people that I had worked with in the radio station where I first started. That was an entrepreneurial experience, I think, of a lifetime. One of the obstacles, Chris had asked me earlier about obstacles and how you overcome those. And one of the things that happened to me is, at the time I was ready to go on the air, I had the FCC approval and had hired the staff, had leased a building, had the tower leased with our antenna up already, and we had all the equipment purchased and installed, and we were ready to go on the air. And I got an alert from the FCC saying we couldn't go on the air because we were 4/10 of a mile inside the Canadian treaty borderline. And in order to go on the air, I had to get a waiver from the Canadian government. And this is one of the lessons that I learned so early that has helped me in critical times through these years. And that was fully absorb the situation, sit back and fully absorb it. And then what you need to do is you need to figure out, where do you need to be? If you need to be here, what is the process in reaching that goal? So my goal was I had to get that waiver. So the first thing I did was I called Senator Lugar's office. He was out of the country, he was unreachable, but I asked for his chief assistant, his chief of staff, and I told him my situation and said that I have to reach the head of the Canadian counterpart to our FCC, and he gave me a name. So I made 20 calls to different people, and finally reached the private number of the counterpart to the United States Federal Communications Commission head. And I called him and I asked for him, and he said, "You got him." And I said, "You're the only person in the world who can help me with a situation that I have. Do you have time to listen to me?" And his response was very simply, "Shoot." So I told him what I needed him to do for me to put the station on the air. And he said he would see what he could do. He asked for my drop-dead date. And a couple of days before the drop-dead date, I got notification from the FCC that the Canadian government had given a waiver to us and we could go on the air. So the lesson there is simply just take time to absorb it, sit back and think of what you have to do, and then just stay with it. Be focused and stay with it. I've had that experience so many times, and it doesn't fail. It's that, oh, never give up, never give up. It works.
Let's see here. Give us a little bit of information on the magazine itself, with the problems that you faced with it through the years, and if there's anything that you would have done differently.
Well, when 9/11/2001, with the tragedy of that day, it put a big scare into everyone, into so many industries, and with the magazine. At that point, I also had the franchise for Travel and Visitors magazine, Where, Indianapolis. That we shut that down because the advertising support was not there. There was no clear indication of when that tourist industry would come back. So we had purchased that to experience what it was like to have an operation outside of the corporate headquarters. The corporate headquarters were in Canada, and they had 56 magazines, and we're an international network of magazines. So with our goal in purchasing a one-year-old magazine, which was Indies Woman, we changed that to Indianapolis Woman and have published that for 15 years. So we're in our 16th year. But our goal was to have as many magazines outside of our corporate office in Indianapolis as possible. So with that franchise operation, we were able to experience what we would be experiencing with operations outside of Indianapolis. So in the question that you asked about what we would do differently, our first operation outside of Indianapolis is St. Louis. We chose St. Louis because it was the same Midwestern values. It was larger than Indianapolis. We know that the potential there is greater. However, what we didn't realize was starting a magazine with a circulation that's smaller than what we have here in Indianapolis and a city that's larger, we didn't have the same penetration. So it was more difficult than what we had anticipated. Now what we've learned from that is we're looking at going into Nashville, Tennessee for our next magazine outside of the Indianapolis area. Nashville is the same population as Marion County, which is the county seat for Indiana and the Indianapolis Metro. So in going into Nashville, we have added a third city that is easier to penetrate. We've got more experience because we have 2 successful magazines. We can take what we have as our footprint in Indianapolis, and we have repeated that in St. Louis. However, we've localized that. So we take that same basic footprint into Nashville, Tennessee. One of the advantages for Nashville is not only the size is manageable, but also it is so well known and so many celebrities that are recognizable that it makes a really good third edition. And the reason that is important for the business model is that there are rep firms who handle national advertisers, and they will buy a company with 3 or more magazines, but they won't buy 1 or 2 because they only handle large accounts. So by adding Nashville, we have Indianapolis, which is very well established. We have 210,000 readers monthly with Indianapolis Woman magazine, and we have approximately 100,000 in St. Louis. So that's a critical mass. So we have the advantage basically of having with rep firms, they will buy all 3 magazines, and by doing that, it's like we have additional people on our sales staff without the overhead of that. So for us to have that third market is very critical. And back to the question, Chris, that you asked, is we would have chosen for a second city, a smaller city, so that we could have more penetration much faster.
All right, this kind of highlights rolls right in the next one. Time. Oh, we got plenty of time. Okay. Let's see here. Concerning the future success